All right, this is a replay review for isbad234, who is going to be playing Frontline on Ice Cream. So I'm going to talk about Ice Cream in general as a map. Then I'm going to kind of do a breakdown, detailed look at your play and do a step-by-step for any small mistakes I see. And then we'll just have a brief summation at the end. So first, let's talk about Ice Cream. Ice Cream is a massive map, but if you look at it, it's also an incredibly narrow map, which means it takes a long time for units to get from one side of the map to the other where they can actually fight. So a lot of times what this means is it's easier to pork on this map because it takes longer for reinforcing units to come. It also means that the games on this can end up, if you don't win early, they can end up really, really porky. So you want to focus on scaling if you notice the game stalling out. The second thing that is important to note on Ice Cream is that it's also a strong side, weak side map, specifically on the top and on the bottom position. So yellow and blue, and then purple and red. So if you look at red's position, these are the mexes that the red player will traditionally take. So he's got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the red player normally takes this Geo. The player he's against over here just takes these mexes. And so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So red has like a 5 mex advantage, and so does blue, which means when you're playing, this player actually normally ends up as your techer. The air positions are Ozpark right here and Locust right here, so orange and green. And when you play it in lower TS lobbies, people might assume that it's like a 4-4 or like a 3-5. But when you play it with more aggressive players, it normally ends up as like a 7-1, where every single player is pushing towards middle, and then the red player will push to here and then tech. They do that because they have a Geo and they have so many mexes. So you might assume, oh, the player back here, like brown can tech because they're safe, but brown has 3 mexes, right? Red has 12. So in terms of metal, it's just more efficient for this player to either send metal or just send units so that red can spend more time teching and get an advanced Geo up sooner. The last super important thing that isn't apparent when you first look at it, and you only notice it when you start playing it, is that the ice, which is right here, has a move speed modifier. So if you look in the bottom left, it says speeds tank 125, bot 95, and hover 135. So vehicles move 25% faster, bots move 5% slower, and hovers move 35% faster. And that means that generally speaking, when you're fighting, it's more advantageous to go vehicles, because while bots can kind of thrive in the middle like part here, as soon as you get on the ice, if you have bots and they have vehicles, it's much, much harder to fight into them because they have such a speed advantage. And because you're used to the speed of normal units, you'll kind of take fights that you're like, oh yeah, my grunts can close on these, but everything is faster and you're slower. And so it just makes it more difficult. So for that reason, a lot of times it's a bot map. And the middle part is a little weird because it ends up divided based off starting location. So the middle line normally ends up about here, but the red players are going to come up here and they'll hold this, and these blue players will come up here and they'll kind of hold this. And then middle is a bit more up for grabs. It sort of depends on which one of, whether purple or whatever, this is light green, kind of who wins this fight. But there'll be the dividing line here where this half is owned by the west team and this half is owned by the east team. And that ends up working decently well because you can kind of pork right here and hold a lot of this area if you guys are the first to claim it. And then you can kind of push up. But a ton of games on Ice Cream normally end from where red and blue are, which are the carry positions. And they'll go tanks. They'll go like tigers or jags. And they'll abuse the move speed bonus. And they'll come up here and they'll just run up and they'll start killing bases. Or like hitting blue's eco, because blue's army will normally be up here and the tanks can just run up really quick and just start shredding anything that's unprotected. So with that said, that's Ice Cream, and let's take a look at isbad234. All right, so you've got three. What was that one? So you've got 3 mexes, or you're going to drop a solar. It's slightly more efficient if you actually, when you're going to go solar, to go triple solar into double mex, but this isn't the end of the world. You know, you're going to lose whatever the like 14 metal, I think, or 20 metal. But it's not a huge deal. So you're going to do this, and then you're going to drop a solar, and then you're going to go into a bot lab. So I would recommend against going bots on this map just because of the speed modifier that you see on the ice right here. With that said, bots can definitely fight really well on the middle, and once you get across, right, this is kind of sloped, so they can kind of have an advantage there. But if you end up fighting, which your position normally does, your position normally ends up fighting like somewhere around here, you're gonna be fighting, if he goes vehicles, which he is, you're going to be fighting fast vehicles with slow bots. So it's going to be hard for you to push in. And normally on like equal ground, bots don't win against vehicles. So that just makes it even more difficult. All right. Hold on. Let me turn down this music. It's a little too bumping. So we're going to go bots, and we're going to go 2 cons, 3 grunts. Okay. 6 grunts. Okay. I think you can probably get away with like way more cons at the start. So it's a little bit more efficient if you, because you still have E right now, if you boost until you run out of E and then build the solar and then boost and then build the grunt first. Okay, so this comes with just playing more maps. But like I said before, Ice Cream is a huge map. And so getting out military units first generally isn't as good, because it takes a long time for them to get anywhere. I think it would actually make total sense for you to drop like 2 or 3 cons first, so that you get more energy and you have more build power, and then you can drop grunts. I think opening grunts isn't all that strong here, because by the time they can walk to anyone's base and start harassing, the person here will already have like way more stuff. Like they'll already have units coming. And so it's more efficient if you can just greed at the start. All right. And we've dropped a lot of wind. So the wind hasn't been that bad. Keep in mind, if you mouse over the wind, it'll actually tell you this. So it's better to build solar when average wind is below 5 for Armada or 6 for Cortex, but the average wind speed on this map is 8. So you can definitely get a couple solars early on, or if you want to use them as metal storage, it's always good to drop them. But you actually want to transition into wind a little bit later on, because at 8 or like above 6, right, it's more metal effective than solar is. So you could totally just have a con come over here and just start building a big wind farm right there, right? And you could even build a couple nanos later, because you want to put, if the game goes longer, you'd want to put like an AFU farm back here, because if you put it up front, it's a little bit more dangerous, because if anything gets close, it's just dead. So consider wind speed when you're playing these games. And just because you're core, you don't have to go solar, right? I mean, like core A solars are awesome. And, basic solars are 5 metal cheaper, but this is actually a situation where, because the minimum wind is 5, the average is 8, and it's actually totally fine to build wind on this map. All right, so here are your grunts, and we got some vehicles running past. Yeah, I think you're a little bit behind on BP just because of your starting build order. So I probably would have swapped it. Oh, we're getting raided. So yeah, the unfortunate thing here, right, is that you have these grunts and they didn't even stop the raid. So these grunts are just kind of chilling and they haven't even gotten to the enemy base, right? And yeah, so that's just a small swap there. So good idea for having the grunts early, but just reverse the order. Go cons and then go grunts. All right, a little bit of harassment. A big brain play is if you're on grid and you control B, you can detonate a mechs and it actually won't kill those solars, but it'll kill the scouts when they're that close. So before it dies, hit control B and it'll count down and then explode, and you'll just kill all those rovers. All right, and you pop out grunts to respond, which is great. Your comm is moving to front, so even though you got attack there, your comm's moving. That's great. You want to get him to the front as soon as possible. You want to kind of set momentum. Can we rebuild this? Okay, so you're starting to build more grunts, which I'm not against. Okay, and then your grunts come in here. Doing some light scouting. Okay. Ooh. Always try to spam radar, especially on high ground, right? So some people, like a lot of people will actually, because radars are cheap, they'll drop a radar before they even leave their base. But Rompy has one here. But especially for this mid ground here, before you leave, I would just drop a radar like that, probably, just to give you vision above so that you know if you're going to get raided. Alternatively, you can drop one like here, but there's no reason not to drop one there and then drop another one like a little bit later on. All right, and we're spamming grunts. So the issue that you're going to run into here, right, is you guys have seen the people who are here, and you know both of them are vehicles. So when you see that, I would probably recommend swapping out of bots if you're going to be fighting here, because it's going to be super hard for you to fight into them for a number of reasons, right? These lanes are like, it's really easy for the vehicles to get around. So it's not a narrow lane where you can abuse rocket bots, right? And the terrain is hard to use thugs and res bots. So for you specifically, right, you're going to be sending core bots into like Whistler Janus, probably with shell shockers behind it. So that's a little bit difficult, but I mean, you can definitely fight into it. You'll need kind of a combination of things. So let's see. All right. So you're almost at 200E. And I guess, does Rompy not take this? So if Rompy doesn't take this, you should. And we have a con coming. Okay, so you have a comm coming to front, which I like. But again, I would just say do wind and do it like back here instead of all these solars. Just because you will need the E and it's more cost effective. All right, we got all of our grunts. So bots are very much a tempo unit. Like if you want to go bots and fight vehicles, you need to attack with your bots before they have a critical mass of vehicles. So what that means is, like in a situation like this, these guys need to go and attack and see what's here. You also probably need more radar. I would drop like a radar even further just because this is the edge of it. But like, what's here? So if you run it this now, with good flanking, you might be able to kill both. But as soon as he starts to collect more, like when he gets a bunch of Januses and Whistlers, grunts can't fight into that. So if you do want to go grunt versus vehicle, like bot versus vehicle, you need to be aggressive, right? You need to have rocket bots and grunts, and you need to just be like pushing and chipping constantly. If you don't have aggression, they'll get more and more vehicles, and they'll get a critical mass where it's just borderline impossible for you to break them. Okay, so far so good. You definitely have a lot of metal. You might want to consider more cons a little bit early on because you need the build power. And this guy should be boosting that, but he's not. Cons give you E too. Don't forget that. All right, you just drop some LLTs, which is fine. And we still don't know what these are. In these situations where like you see the radar dots, but you don't know what it is, a lot of times, I think it's worth it. Oh, okay, kill that. Nice, nice. It's worth it to just run one thing up and see what these are, right? Because if these are Whistlers, you need a different response. If these are Stouts, you need a different response. If it's like a Janus mix or Shell Shockers, you need a different response. So we see a Whistler. We see multiple Whistlers. All right. If you aren't going to do a swap here and you kind of want to just hold until Rompy finishes his T2, then you probably want to back up a little bit, like you might have to just seed this Mex. If you want to hold that Mex, you're going to kind of be fighting into 2 and purple's here. You might want to back up a little bit, and you might want to try to like pork here so that when the vehicles come up, you aren't fighting them on ice because it's a little harder. But when you fight against whistlers, you need to either out repair them or you need to like trade better with them. So you can trade better with them by building a warden like the HLT, because it has like it can trade against whistlers, right? And they can't alpha strike it. But you need to kind of think about that. You can also build dragons maws and then have nanos behind them repairing. But you definitely don't want your grunts in front there, and I would have your commander boosting. Oh, and you started building the Geo. Okay, so Rompy isn't going to take the Geo. Normally he would. The one thing that I'm noticing here is you don't quite have as much E, which is a little rough, right? So if you put this in wind right now, you'd have way more. On your team, I don't think there's a core player who went wind, so we can't. Yeah, we can't really check. Oh, she's wind. Hold on. So this is 240 energy for 1170 metal. And yours is 180 energy for 1350 metal. So, oh, sorry, did I select them all? Yeah. So you can just see from that, granted, the wind is almost at max, but the average wind is 8. So I think that if you had had more wind, it would have been better. But also, whenever you build a Geo, you always want to drop E storage before. A Geo's 13,000 energy, right? If you look in the bottom left, it's 13,000 energy, and your E storage will give you like half of that. Actually, I think core is more. Yeah, no, core is 6,000. So it gives you almost half of it. So if you drop that down and then fill it before you start building, you're much less likely to E-stall. And especially E-stalling when you're trying to like pork mid and hold this is going to be really hard. All right, so you do have a forward radar. Perfect. Probably want a jammer relatively soon. We've got pop up there. Gonna try to build a pop up there. So I'm a little concerned because I feel like you don't have that many units. With bots, you kind of have to flood with units. So I would have more BP and just be pumping out more. Oh, we're getting chipped. So whistlers, until there's like 10 or 12 of them, they can't one-shot a lot of things. So in this situation, you just need to repair these. Have your commander, you can just hit R and just area repair, but you need to area repair all of these so that the whistlers don't kill them. This unclaimed max should be tapped, but that's more of Rompy than you. You could send something down and tap it though. Okay. It's 7 minutes. And unless you're on a lane map or even on a lane map, after like 6 or 7 minutes, you need to look at the map and say like, all right, who has T2? So Rompy has T2. And if you can buy a T2 con from him like right now, it'd be awesome, right? Because you want to up these mexes and do everything there. And more importantly, you want to up your Geo. And Snowberry has T2. So both these players have T2 and it's 7 minutes and you have the metal, right? It's 470. So you might as well just get a T2 this early. And as a mental note, when you're playing, just say, oh, it's like 6 minutes, 7 minutes. Let me see who's building a T2 lab and let me see when I can get T2. Because if you can get T2 and up all these and up this, then you'll have a much better economic advantage. And even though you're bots now, right, you can go core bots and you can go, you know, Arbiter, Sheldon, Mammoth, whatever, and you'd be able to fight a lot of this stuff, at least until T3 comes. And you can pork with like persecutors up here. Okay. So now you have rocket bots and they're starting to chip. That's awesome, but you're getting shot. So you can see how this guy's dying. So you did repair, which is awesome. You can also do for like repair bots and for cons, you can turn on repeat and then, you know, normally you issue a move, you hold shift, issue a move command and then hit R and do that. And then the con will go there, and then as soon as anything in the circle is hit, it'll go up and repair it, and then it'll walk back, right? And then that's an easy way to like have your cons repair stuff that's getting damaged, but then not have them sitting on the front lines. You would probably actually want the rally point like there, so then it can walk and then walk back and then walk back. Yeah, I don't think you really want grunts at this point because of what you're fighting into, and because it's going to be really hard because they can just kite you on the ice, right? You're going to be a little bit slower and they're going to be a bit faster. Running into LLTs here and pounders. Ooh. So the Wolverines are rough because it means that you can't really go Warden. You can't go HLT. This is one of the few times where, just because of how porky it is and because you don't have T2 yet, where I would almost recommend going Agitator, because if you have like a high ground Agitator, like where, like here, probably like right there, you can just shell all those positions and they'd have to run into you, and Agitator shred Whistlers. But if you want to fight it with bots, you need way more rocket bots, and you'd need like res bots behind it. But because your lane is super chill, I would say you just want to get T2 and you just want to tech, and you want to probably go vehicles and go tigers and just try to like run up. So this is the situation where you haven't really been e-scaling. Like, you're about to have this geo, which is awesome, but if you had just done this a while ago, you would have been e-scaling this whole time and you'd have a much stronger energy flow. And when that's done, then you'd have even more. You're not actually hurting for E that much, but you should be, because you should be building more units, right? You have a lot of metal. All right, let's speed this up a little bit. That might be too much. I like the jammer. I would probably move it back a little bit, and I like the nanos, but I would also maybe move the nanos back a little bit more. And nanos are great, like if you can have them kind of back, and then you can have them just in range of Dragon's Maws, because the Dragon's Maws have reduced damage. So it's like borderline impossible for Whistlers to kill a closed Dragon's Maw. And what you can do is actually put up a few nanos, kind of like what you're doing here, and put down a couple Dragon's Maws, but then with your commander, just put down a bunch of random just Dragon's Teeth, just the walls. But it makes it much harder because, one, if the tanks run in, they kind of hit other blocks of walls, but then they also don't know which ones are actually Maws. And so you can kind of mind game them just by spamming a bunch of, let's see if anyone does it. Yeah, so like Barry does this here, right? He just has like, well, those are both, that's a claw. Oh, those are both claws actually. Never mind. But you can totally like drop other ones there, and it works completely fine. So I'd say that is something we could look at. Yeah, so he says T2 please, and you should definitely want it from Rompy because it's right there and it can just come up and help. All right. And we're just kind of trading here. So this is where the move speed really comes in, because all these things can just kite your grunts because they move 25% faster and you move 5% slower. I'd also really caution about throwing away units like this. I think the better solution is to just pork here and then scale. You're trying to fight essentially two players at once who have a better unit comp on better terrain, and you're not going to win that fight, right? So instead, you should really just try to like hold here and pork here. And I would literally say an agitator right there would do a ton of damage. And then I think you also want T2. I'm worried that you're going to kind of be losing agency relatively soon, but we'll see. So we'll speed it up. All right, where's our T2, man? Did you buy one I didn't see? Wait, so hold on. Why are we... Another thing is that you're scaling E, which is great, but you have a ton of metal and you aren't using all of your energy, right? It's great because your team needs energy and so they're enjoying the overflow. But if you look up here, you're only using 310 and you're producing like 800. So when you see that imbalance, you need to make converters, right? Energy converter. You need to make some converters and you make them away from your base, or you want to not be building quite as much, right? But it's good to scale energy. It's just that in this situation, it makes way more sense for you to get a tier 2, upgrade your mexes here, and then upgrade this geo, because an advanced geo is like the most efficient energy source in the game outside of wind above, I think, like 23 or something. So it's way more efficient for you to be like where you are at 800 and then upgrade these mexes and then upgrade this geo and then just go T2 and just overwhelm this. If you've tried to break this position a number of times, I think that you need to just kind of understand that you won't break it there. You can give up this mex and you just want to hold here, which is kind of what you did, but you also want to pork here. So you want to have like the claws and stuff that you're building. And then you could even do an HLT there as long as you have stuff that repairs it. So if you're going to abandon this position and those are there, you could actually have these reclaim each other, but you probably, while they're shooting at those, you maybe could have had your rocket bots a little bit closer and kind of traded better. But yeah. All right. So here it's kind of even crazier, right? You're building more energy, but you're M stalling, right? And like you have like 800 excess energy that you're not using. So you either want to be converting it, or you want to be using it like ideally you just want to be converting it, right? You don't need to be building more energy that you aren't using. Like your team is enjoying it, but for your own build, it's just not efficient at all. All right, and he's T2, so your T2 is a little late. So I'm probably going to stop with like the super detailed look there. And I can play the rest of the replay in a second. But my main takeaways from it at this point are just, you're probably not familiar with the map, so you don't know about the move speed diffs, right? But fighting bots into this is just really difficult. That's why I'm assuming Barry went, let's look. Yeah, Barry went vehicles, right? And he went vehicles too, right? And so bots can be nice when you're fighting in here, but vehicles, once you're on the ice, are just way, way better. So I would recommend you I would go vehicles in this situation, specifically because of the move def. And on your starting build, when you are playing on a map that's really big, recognize that this is a huge distance. And so it'll take a long time for offensive units, even scouts, to get to you. So you can greed a little bit more by opening like 2 con or 3 con, right? Or 4 con probably. And then you can pump out grunts to defend against raids or do whatever. And then also for energy, right? So core solars are great, but if the wind is above 6, then you should just make wind because it's more efficient. So average wind speed is 8. So instead of building all these T1 solars, I think you totally should have had a guy in back just building wind, right? You could either do the full grid or you can do rows of 2 like that. So like a row of 2, a row of 2, a row of 2. And then it's a little bit farther back and it's safer generally. I mean, if you get raided, you get raided, but I think that would be a better way to scale your economy. Normally this is for red, but he didn't take it, so that's fine. The last thing is your T2 timing, which I think was like the biggest thing. It's 12 minutes and you don't have T2, right? And I think that's a huge deal. I think Rompy had his T2 like before Brown did at like 7 minutes, right? And if you had bought a T2 con and brought it up and upgraded all of your mexes, you would have a ton of metal, right? And I would guess the people you're fighting against probably, yeah, so they have T2, right? And so you're just going to get overwhelmed with metal. So if you could have gotten that sooner, it would have been, that was not a great image. It would have been much, much better. And then you want to upgrade your AGeo as soon as possible, because like from a Geo to an AGeo, because it's an incredibly efficient thing. And then you just start to build converters now, but you definitely need to build converters sooner, right? You were building A solars, which are 370 metal, while stalling on metal and accessing energy, right? So whenever this number is smaller than this number, you just make converters, right? I mean, there are times where you want to overflow to your team, but generally speaking, you can just make a bunch of converters and then you'd have a much stronger economy, right? One converter is 70 energy for 1 metal a second. So if you were to look at that, right, you can do what? Oh, well, not 10, but you'd have 6, 7, 8, you'd have like 8 more metal income, right? Actually, you probably have more than that, 9 more metal income. And you can go there. So I would say that is something that I would recommend for this specifically. And then if you're going to use Dragon's Maws, try to have nanas with them. You can also build teeth with it. And when you play bots, you need to be a lot more aggressive with them. You can't just kind of sit back and let the other person build up more vehicles. So let's watch the rest in ×4 speed and just kind of, I'll give some general comments. So you buy T2 now. One thing I will say is that these bots are so slow. What you actually want to do here, especially because now they have to walk across this, just buy a transport. Transports are 74 metal, right? And you can just buy a transport and just fly it. And it'll be much, much quicker. So that's just a small one. Here are the T2 tanks. Ooh, advanced exploiter. Wait, did you eat? I think you ate your basic solars while you were overflowing. You overflowed your basic solars. Ooh, that's rough. Okay. So, I mean, this is just kind of playing out like a standard ice cream where it sort of stalls out and it'll become an eco war. And that means that you want to be scaling, right? Because if you don't win in the first like 12 to 14 minutes, it's probably going to go to T3, which means that whoever has the best, like the bigger T3 army, will probably end up winning. Rompy breaks through here though. That's awesome. All right, you're upping your mexes and you're going to do that. And then he goes T2. So after you upgrade your mexes and you start to do this, normally it's like after your first fusion, you sort of want 3 things. You want, generally speaking, some form of anti-air, like some flak, whether they're, you know, normally it's just like flak, so you could do a screamer on hold fire. You also want anti-stealth and you want anti-nuke. See how they have anti-nuke back here and you guys have no anti-nuke up here? If any of these guys have a nuke, they can just erase you or Rompy. So at this timing, you know, especially like 18 minutes, you really need anti. So it looks like, I thought you guys said you lost this, but let's see. Pushing. And let's check out the end of the game. So red pushes in the bottom. You guys push here as well. Blue comes up. Ooh, that bombing run though. So in a situation like that where people get bombed, and if you look and your air player has like no fighters, you need to make flak. It's super, super important. And oh, okay, this is super dangerous. I'm not sure if you're aware, but you can build on the ice. So this is almost like a frontline fusion. I like the idea of like you want this, but it needs to be like here. If it's on the front, anything that gets through will just kill that, and then it's kind of like good game for your entire economy. So now the game's gonna stall out, and then whoever has the better T3 will probably win. So you drop some mammoths, which I like. You've got some spam, but your spam is all kind of dying here. And you're dying to starlights. This is actually, are these arbs? Or, oh, that's a negotiator. When you get in these porky positions, it's always great if you have some T2, you know, defenses. So probably the best thing you could do here is actually make high ground persecutors, because they'll get the bonus range. That is not a T2 comp. So if you have a high ground persecutor like here, actually probably, well, before that died, if you could get a high ground persecutor there, it can just shell like everything, and it has increased range. Okay, so yeah, you make the switch to T3, and then because of what you're fighting and just like what you see here, probably makes sense to go catapults. Demon. So when you go core T3, keep in mind what you're fighting. Demons are great raiding units, but they're not going to break a front line, especially if that front line has a bunch of starlights, and you can see the starlights firing, right? So to break that, you just need catapults. If you have like 1 to 2 catapults and they fire into here, you'll kill all of that. All right. Still scaling. Oh, okay. You never want to build converters next to these, because when converters die, they have like a death explosion. And if you have them next to your fusions or your advanced fusions, they'll kill the advanced fusions when they blow. So you always want to have it be like, these are the right buildings to have, but you want fusions and then nanos and then converters. If you nestle them like this, when these die, it'll explode, 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 and then these will explode, and then your whole base will explode. So you just want to try to space them out slightly better. I might just stop it there. I think that there's probably not too much more gained for this, just because I think you guys are going to get outscaled. So from that, just like a quick review, vehicles would be better for this, for the move speed. You can greed because the map is bigger. On the majority of maps, even though your core, wind will be better, right? Especially with a minimum wind of 5. So you could have wind farmed back here. You want to try to get T2 as soon as possible. Early T2 is absolutely amazing, right? And so if you had T2 earlier, you would have had like way more units that you could send. And in T3, Shivas are awesome, but if you're fighting into like the starlight ball that you saw, I actually would have opened katas and done that instead. And then the last kind of scaling thing is, once you have your first tier 2 energy source, whether it's like a fusion, an AGeo, an AFU, you really need to make flak, anti-nuke, and anti-stealth, right? So normally you'll just do like some bird shots around your base, and then you'll make, utility, you'll make a nemesis, right? Which is the anti-intrusion. So like you can't get hit by like gremlins or something. And then, where's anti-prevailer. You want one of those as well. So that's it. Sorry, I'm a little sick, so I can't speak that well. I hope that helps. Let me know what your follow-up questions are for this, and I hope it was helpful.